So last summer there was this thing called COVID. You remember that? And I was growing impatient, as we all were. Just laying on my couch all day watching Netflix, not really doing much of anything, just becoming lazy. I took up bird watching, weirdly, for like a couple weeks. I'm like, this has to stop. I'm old. I'm not bird watching old, though. So, like, I can't be sitting on my back porch for hours on end just watching birds. And so I'm like, listen, everything's canceled this summer. Camp's canceled. CIY is canceled. Everything's canceled. So what we're going to do, we're going to go on an epic family trip. Okay, a family trip that we've been wanting to go on for a long time. This is the opportunity to do it, so let's do it. So I bought a new pop-up camper for my family. I even bought, this will tell you how much of a dad I am. I even bought a new minivan to pull my new pop-up camper. I'm living the dad life, okay? And so we got in our minivan with our little pop-up. My brother and his family, they have their own camper too, so they kind of joined us, and we just started on this epic road trip out west. And so we're on the road, we're camping for 2.5 weeks. And I think there's a picture, yeah, the picture's up on the screen. So this gives you a little bit of a clue how long this trip was. I hit the button when I left my driveway, and I hit the button again when I got back to my driveway. 93 and a half hours on the road. That's a lot of windshield time. That is a stinky, smelly minivan, I promise you that. 93, some of you are thinking, man, we drove a long way to get here this morning. You know nothing, okay? You know nothing. 93 and a half hours, but it was awesome. It was amazing. Just spending that time with the family, seeing the country, going to amazing, outrageous places. My dad, who didn't go on the trip with us but wished that he could, he would send me texts about every day. And the text would usually be something like, hey, where are you at today? Just wanted an update. Where are you at? And I would usually respond with a picture. Just take a picture real quick, showing him where we were on the road. So one day we would be at a frontier prison in Laramie, Wyoming. The next day we'd be hanging out with the buffalo at Yellowstone National Park. The next day we might be around a lake at the Grand Tetons. A few days later I'd snap another picture. We'd be at Mount Rushmore. Just wanting to know where we're at. Guys, we've had an epic trip this last year, haven't we? Over a year, really. We've been on quite the trip. And I think it would do us well this week to pause and to ask ourselves that same question. Where are we at? Where are we at? Where are you at tonight in your schooling? I wouldn't mind if Zoom became another 4-letter word moving forward, to be honest with you. Where are you at with your schooling? Where are you at tonight in your relationships? Where are you at with your friends? Do you have some friends in your life you've grown closer to over the last year? Maybe you actually have other friends in your life that maybe they've dropped off a little bit. You don't see each other as much as you used to. Where are you at in your relationships? Where are you at? Some of you are in sports. Some of you are in the arts. You do choir, you do band. So where are you at in your training? I have a very good friend. Their daughter, 17 years old, swam at the Olympic trials this morning. It's a huge deal. So proud of her. But I know most of the year she was kind of stressing out. Where am I at in my training? I just don't know. Everything's canceled. I'm not sure that I'm thriving. I'm not sure that I'm succeeding. Where are you at? Where are you at tonight? Well, literally, we know where we're at, right? We're on the campus of Johnson University, Knoxville, Tennessee. We're at Move. I can't tell you how happy I am to be back at Move. There was a hole in my summer last year. So glad to be back. One of the questions you need to ask this week is, where are you at with God? Where are you at with God? I have a student in our D group. I help with the discipleship group my son's in at church, and have this one kid in our D group. He's a very social kid, and so he ended up going into quarantine multiple times in the fall semester as a result. And the poor kid. And so I asked him, I'm like, so what have you been doing all those days at your house by yourself? Like, how much Netflix have you watched this semester? And he looked at me and he kind of smiled and he's like, yeah, I've watched a lot of TV. But he said, you know what I've also done is I actually picked up my Bible for the first time. And I read the Bible for the first time. And I discovered a prayer life. And I grew closer to God than I've ever been in my life. I was so proud of him. Maybe that's the story for some of you in here. When I ask you the question, where are you at with God? Your answer is, well, actually, I'm in a kind of a good place right now, to be honest with you. But I know that's not true for all of you. I know of other students in our youth group that I haven't seen for over a year. And they've grown distant from us. They've grown distant from God. Some of them are questioning where God's even at. If God is even there, if God even cares about them. Maybe that's you tonight. Maybe you're sitting out here and you're thinking, yeah, where I'm at with God, I'm not in a good place. I'm not in a good place. Or maybe some of you are thinking, when it comes to your relationship with God, like, I don't even know what that is. I don't even know if I believe in God, let alone have a relationship with Him. Well, I want you to know if that's you, then that's okay. You're in the right place this week. This week is a golden opportunity for you, for all of us, really, to take that first step back to God, to start that journey. But here's the really good news, and this is the good news of the gospel. This is what I really need you to hear tonight. The story, our story with God, your story with God, doesn't begin with your first step. The story actually begins with God taking the first step towards us. Now, I know Nate already read this passage, but it's the first night. I know we're not completely locked in yet. You may have missed it the first time. I need to read it again. So this is in John's Gospel, the first words in John's Gospel. It says this: in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through Him, all things were made. Without Him, nothing was made that has been made. In Him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Now, you've already been told the reason why John wrote his gospel. The reason why John wrote this gospel is so that we might believe that Jesus is our hero, that Jesus is our Savior, and that by believing in Jesus, we can actually have life. That's why John wrote this gospel, that you would believe in Jesus. Now, like any hero, it's good for us to have an idea of his origin story. Where did he come from? It helps us to appreciate the story better if we know how it began. Just like, it helps us to understand the story of Wolverine better when we understand that he was experimented upon by evil scientists. And we can understand the story of Captain America better when we can understand that he was experimented on by apparently good scientists. I don't know. It helps us to understand Batman better when we know that Batman was what? He was an orphan, right? And so was Superman. And so was Spider-Man. And come to think of it, so was Harry Potter too. I'm not sure what's going on with that. Jesus' origin story goes back way before the empty tomb. It goes back way before the cross. It goes way back before Bethlehem even, and the manger, and the shepherds, and the wise men. The story of Jesus goes back to the very beginning words of Genesis, when the world was created. Jesus is the very Word of God. The Word who was with God, the Word who was God, the Word that brought everything into existence, everything that you see around you, and everything that you don't see. Everything was brought into existence through this Word. And John says, that's Jesus. Now, I know that can be a confusing concept to think about. But here, let me try to make it as simple as I can. When you're talking about Jesus, you're talking about your Creator. When you're talking about Jesus, you're talking about the one who's given life to all things. When you talk about Jesus, you're talking about God. And in a world full of death, Jesus, we're told, Jesus is life. In a world full of darkness, Jesus is the light. Light here represents hope. Light represents hope. Darkness makes us feel disoriented. Darkness makes us feel lost. Darkness might cause us to panic. Darkness leads to an absence of peace. But all it takes is one light shining in the darkness, and that panic is replaced by peace and confidence and hope. Jesus is the light shining in the midst of a world that, let's all admit it, a world that is much too dark. Jesus is the light. Goes on in verse 9, it says, the true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. John likes that word true. He uses it a lot. It's a word that means authentic, the real thing. So he says the true light, he's saying the authentic light, the real light is coming into the world. When I was on this camping trip, one of the places that we stopped was a place called Devil's Tower. Which is in like eastern Wyoming, and it's in the middle of nowhere. And we got there, it was very late at night. It was actually after midnight. And so I was very quickly trying to set up the camper so that we could go to bed. It'd been a long day on the road. I was tired, I was cranky, and just wanting to go to bed. My wife comes into the camper as I'm setting it up. She says, Chet, you got to come outside. Real quick, come outside. Now, normally, when something like this happens, what it means is I have to go kill something, okay? Usually that something is about that big, but something needs to be stepped on. That's usually, my wife usually comes to me with that concern, with that need. So I'm like, all right, I'll go out and step on the spider for you. That's not what it was, though. We get outside and she says, look up. And so I look up, and I am amazed. Amazed at what I saw. The whole sky was just full of stars like I'd never seen before. Stars, constellations, galaxies. It was so amazing. I went to the picnic table there at our campsite. I just laid on the picnic table for 10 minutes just looking up at the stars. Now here's the thing, though. Those stars, they're always there. You can go outside tonight and look up at the sky. Those stars are up there in the sky, but you won't see them very well. You know why? You won't see them very well because of all the artificial light that's around us. Where we were camping, there was no light anywhere to be seen except for the light coming from the stars. We have a hard time seeing it because of artificial light. I think you know where I'm going with this. We sometimes have a hard time seeing Jesus, seeing the light of Jesus, because we settle for all the artificial light, all the false hopes, the false expectations, all the false lights around us. We get distracted by those things, and it causes us to miss the authentic, real, true light of Jesus. And that's what John tells us happened when Jesus first came into the world. The world didn't recognize him. The world didn't know him. The world rejected him. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came into that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet, to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision, or a husband's will, but born of God. The Word, listen, the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. Made his dwelling there. That's actually a camping word. It means to pitch a tent. He came and camped in our midst. He made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth, the creator of the universe, guys. The creator of the universe came near to us, became one of us, so that we can be saved from our brokenness, so that we can be saved from darkness and death and sin. God took that first step. The gospel tells us just how far he was willing to go. Jesus suffered death on our behalf so that we can live. In the book of Hebrews, towards the end of the New Testament, Hebrews chapter 2 says this: "Since the children have flesh and blood, he too shared in their humanity, so that by his death he might break the power of him who holds the power of death, that is, the devil, and free those who all their lives were held in slavery by their fear of death." Because God took that first step in Jesus, we can have now true hope, true peace, true freedom from our fears, freedom from the slavery of the fear of death, because God took that first step. And I just ask you the question tonight, doesn't that sound like something that you want? You know, the weird thing about the Gospel of John, when you compare it to the other Gospels, there's no parables in the Gospel of John. You know the parables, these stories that Jesus told. Parable of the prodigal son, Good Samaritan. There's no parables in the Gospel of John. What there are in the Gospel of John is 27 different interviews, conversations, where Jesus is talking, usually one-on-one, talking to an individual. Oftentimes a very surprising individual, and we're going to be learning about some of these conversations this week. But this gospel, the Gospel of John, shows us a Jesus who's very intimate, a Jesus who's very personal, a Jesus who comes near and meets us where we are. With all of our hang-ups, with all of our weaknesses, with all of our brokenness, he meets us where we are. With all of our questions. You have questions this week? Bring them to Jesus. With all of our fears, with all of our stubbornness and our brokenness, Jesus meets with us. A Jesus who is for all, forever, but who is also for you and you and you and for all of us forever.